Okay, so let's get back to this flower. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to darken our darks to set the flower, pop the flower out and set the background back. And, some people might want to start with the flower itself, but I like to start with the darks to make sure I know just how light to make the flower. Because, once again, value and color are relationships, and if I start making this light, I don't know how dark my darks are. So I'm just going to knock in some darks in there, and the darks are made with, I have it with Hooker's Green and Alizarin Crimson, and I used several different types of ways to make a black, and I use that one when I know that what I'm making darks for a foliage, so it has a green base to it. It also makes a really beautiful black. And sometimes black's a big pain in the neck because sometimes different colors that they recommend that you use for black will dry very dull, and some will dry shiny, and ultimately you want them all to dry the same shininess. Now, that being said, there are products that you can put over paintings, like a varnish, but for the most part, most of those need to be done 6 months to a year after the painting is done. I find I sell them too quickly to do that. Some of them that I've still had, I've done that with, but for the most part, I sell them too quickly. Now, there is a type of Gamsol product, I can't remember it off the top of my head, that you can use once it feels physically dry to the touch. It's I can't remember the name of it, but it's a Gamsol product, so you can look that up. Now, just by putting in those darks there, look at how that already made the peonies pop forward. The other thing that used to, when I was first learning how to paint, that was confusing for me is green. You think of how many greens are there? Green is green, right? I remember I used to think that. But the reality is, like all colors, there are various temperatures, shades, and hues of a color. So green is a good example to understand that. Green is made from blue and yellow. Some greens are a little more bluer, some are a little more yellow, so that's kind of where you start. And then some greens are a little more gray, so you would add red. And some greens are a little more warm, so you'd add like a reddish yellow. Not necessarily an orange, but really a yellow that has a little red in it. And so it all comes down to amounts. If you add too much red into the actual green, you will get a gray. But if you add the red into the yellow parts of it and make the yellow that you use a little more red, you'll get kind of like an army green. Okay, so I've decided I am going to stick with the grass on this, and I'm going to just gesture a little bit of darks in there. It's just kind of a tickle. Gesture is your scribble. Don't lose your scribble. I think I tell that to the kids at least once a day. Because kids think, oh, I'm too old to scribble. Well, no, I love to scribble. Scribble is the best way to get the feeling of a painting. I was a little concerned this morning that I wasn't going to be able to do this because despite the rain we're having, we have construction going on next door, and it was pretty loud. But they seemed to realize that the rain was too much and they left. So here we are, painting. The light might be a little weird because it is dark in here, even though I have a direct window light coming in, which is the way I like to paint. Okay, now some of these yellows are a little more yellowy over here, and they're a little more blue over there. Do you see that? Can you see how this is more blue and that's more yellow when you look at the original photo? So let's start first with the yellow ones and just kind of give a gesture of it. And they're not completely yellow. They kind of fall into a darkness here. They're kind of just the tips. There's a bunch of little ones here that aren't in my drawing, so I'm just going to add them in. Don't be afraid to redraw when you see something, you know, or to add. In other words, don't be a stickler just for your original drawing. Every painting line is a drawing line, and therefore if the drawing needs to be done up a little bit more, then do it with the paint, you know, if you can. There's a lot of this is also made up here, because remember there's a flower up there that I decided to eliminate. So we're going to have to just kind of make that up. So sticking to it's lighter on the tips, I'm going to put one here. It's really about design, you know. What is a pleasant design? And the wonderful thing about leaves are they're pointy, so they can point the viewer's eye in a direction that you may want them to go. Okay, now there's another kind of green in here that's a little cooler because it's in the shadows. And this feels a little too warm for me. So I'm just going to experiment with some color. I'm going to take that light green here, add a little bit of light blue to it, see what I get. And I'm not going to bring it all the way down. I'm just going to have it be the next layer, because, you know, the shadow doesn't cut off like abruptly, and some of these leaves are underneath, and so they create this cooler kind of green. And then I can use that color for the tips of these, because then that's going to get even darker in there. So, and that will carry it kind of like a local color. So the light green was made with a lot of yellow, a little bit of cerulean blue, and a little bit of white if you need it. Don't use too much though. There are certainly all different kinds of greens. I like to purchase sap green and hooker's green and olive green. Kind of saves me a step, and it is a little richer in color. So you can keep that in mind. But if you're first starting out, just use the primary colors that you have. You won't get the vibrance that I have perhaps, but you will get an understanding of color and of how to paint. Sometimes if you start off with too many colors when you're a beginner, you don't really understand color theory. One reason why at Acorn we have a limited palette to the amount of primaries and secondaries. Well, actually we don't have secondaries, we have just primaries, and we have the kids make their secondaries. But one reason why we do that is so that they have an understanding of color. And then later on, when they get to doing this a little bit more, we tell them to purchase the other ones. Now there's a little bit of this scribble in here too. Not much though, just a little. trying to decide what this is. I think that's kind of a combination of both. I'm just going to throw it in like that. Okay, now the darks over here. Are you're going to make a green with blue and yellow, and you're going to add a little bit of both cerulean blue and ultramarine to get a darker, cooler green. Now when I do my flowers, I will go in and be very intricate about the leaves and so forth, and you can certainly do that. That would take me probably, to do a painting this size in that level, would take me probably a week, and I'm not sure you guys A, need that, or B, want that. So I try to simplify it here so that the kids can also work on it. Otherwise, trust me, you'd get bored. So I'm just giving you the basic foundations, and if you want to take it that next level because you feel you can, then by all means go for it. Do a few more scribbles down here. The very last part of this grass area, what we'll do is we'll do with a very small round brush. We'll just do a few strokes. But this is kind of laying the foundations for those. It was noted to me that our landscape video, for some reason, the audio dropped out on the end of it. I so apologize. I didn't catch it. Nobody caught it because we, checked the beginning. Yeah, it's got sound. Okay. And then put it in because we're so new at this, and we don't have the original video, so I had to eliminate video off of my phone because I do a lot of these on my phone to make room for more video for my storage. So yeah, we're learning. Okay, let's see. Now if I just throw in a little bit of this and gesture, because this light area is confusing, so I'm just going to throw in some like a medium green. Not too cool, not too warm. It's going to feel warm because it's up next to these parts here, but okay. Now, green and red are complements, so you want to make sure your brush is really clean before you go to that next color, because otherwise you're going to cancel out the brightness that you're trying to create. And we're going to start from the center. I took some, it's so hard to get different kinds of reds. You almost have to buy different kinds of paint. And so I have this Provence by Williamsburg. Provence, I think it's violet, that I added with some alizarin crimson, because even though red is a warm color, this pink is pretty cool compared to the greens around it. So I'm just going to come in first and start with that. And I'm going to look at it a little more closely than I did the last time. I'm using a number 4 master stroke Blick Red Sable. You can use the bristle brushes if you choose. I want to break up this line because it isn't a straight line, it's a bunch of pointy, spiky, yellowy things. Yeah, that's a technical term. Now I will be adding some reflected light on top of this deep color that I have here. So you may see it as, oh my gosh, she's going so dark with that. But remember, in shadows, you'll always find reflected lights. So if you put a shadow in, you can't stop there. And if you find you have stopped there, you're going to go back and look, because that means in there's a lighter value somewhere that would be a reflected light. But before I put that in, I want to define this particular color first. Like I said, it's really tough to get these reds or pinks. You know, that looks purple. I'm going to try some alizarin crimson and white. It's really about going into the colors we've already made, adding some lighter and darker colors to that. I'm going to try, for a reflected light, I'm just going to take a cad red, alizarin crimson, and a little bit of white. And, you know, if you don't know where they are and you can't really see the reflected lights, the best bet is to find the center of your shadows and just throw a light in there. That'll, until you can train your eye properly, that will hold you over. Also, I want to express how important it is to squint, because when you squint, it simplifies. And flowers especially can get incredibly complicated. So you want to squint to like bring you back a little bit. Okay, where is the overall dark versus the overall light? Because with flowers, you can get so caught up and so confused as where you are as far as where, which petal you're on and things like that, that sometimes you can do that confusing thing. Remember when I said that one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they put light values that are too light in their dark sides? So that can happen. So what I see with this is the darkest part, okay, because it's hooded and underneath. And you got these darks through here. And then this is going to be very light around these edges here. So keep that in mind the whole time you're doing that, even though we're not going to do the lights yet, because we have to do the little bits of shadowy wrinkles that are in the lights first. So that purple that I said before, I'm going to try this color. It's rather bright. It's kind of nice. And that was made with the Provence, I think it's called lavender, but I'm not sure. Provence gray. I mean, if I had the tube out and it wouldn't take me a million years to get it, I would show it to you. I'll make sure I pull it out. I think I pulled it out once in another video. I should keep the tubes out when I do this. That's something I could do. My tubes are so organized that although I can find it easily, it's going to be a lot of loud noise and the camera's kind of in the way. Okay, I just wanted to lighten that out. So basically what I'm putting in is a reflected light in these cast shadows. This is too dark, so we're just gonna do that. Okay, now before I go off to the lights on here, I'm gonna throw in some, I don't know what you call those things on flowers, the yellow things. The yellow things, you know those yellow things. And I'm going to take the round number 2 red sable master stroke. And I'm going to start first with a cadmium yellow deep, which is basically a yellow that has some orange in it. And I'm going to pop it in like this. Now, I'm going to also make some lighter ones, but I'm going to start with this first because, you know, you always start with your darks. I don't know if any of you have peonies flowers, but the first year I had these, these were the first flowers I planted in my garden. I just thought they were so beautiful. And it was just by pure luck that I planted tree peonies as opposed to the regular ones. I think I got them at Costco. And the first year, I remember, I mean, they were blooming and everything right from the get-go. They came right out and stuff. It was really good. But then I saw all these ants on it, and I thought, oh no, it's being attacked. Oh no, I don't like pesticides. I've never in my life in my garden used pesticides, and I wasn't about to start, even though that was the beginning of my garden. I had a garden, you know, at home when I was little. So I didn't know what to do. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And so I just left it. And then I found out, like the next year, there they were again. Oh no. But it didn't seem to bother them last year, so I'm just going to leave it. Maybe that's where they live. And as it turns out, you need to have the ants for the, I think, the pollination on these things. But if you find ants on your peonies, don't fret. That's where they live. And they're not the kind of ants that like go in your house and destroy your house, you know. They're big ants, but they're not carpenter ants. So I'm throwing on there a, what do you call it? It's a very light Naples yellow with white. You could use a lemon yellow with white if you want, which would be a little more greener, or you could use a cadmium yellow with white, which would be a little warmer, just a little lighter than this. Not too much white. White is just used to create the hue, so don't go too crazy with it, because too much white will will dull down a color. So you got to kind of be careful of that. The center of this is pretty light. And even though we know that these are like things that are, you know, kind of a straight line, they're not really. They're kind of a squiggly line. I put straight lines in with the first layer, and now I'm just going to squiggle some lines. Okay, so now we're ready for the really light parts, which are basically white. So I'm going to take a number 2 filbert master stroke brush, if you can see that. It's kind of curved at the top there. So some brushes are pointy and some are flat across and some are curved. I personally, and it's a personal thing, I personally like the filberts because I found that when I was portrait painting, I got used to them doing portraits. When I was portrait painting, I could make it flat if I need to, but for the most part, it creates a softer line. All right, so I'm just going to take some white. Got to anchor my hand because God knows how shaky I am. And I'm really going to follow what I see on these edges here, okay, because they have a, I don't know, what you call that, a scalloped edge? Flower petals have their own distinctive edges to them. For instance, if you look at the different varieties of roses, you know, some of them are, you know, just sharp edges. Some are, you know, scalloped. Some are just like this. I mean, it will define which flower it is you're looking at. So it's important to pay attention to those. Now you want to keep some of this pink that's in there also. You're not just going to throw in just white and cover the whole thing. You're going to throw the white in where you see the white. And if it's an edging, and sometimes it is, like right here, you're just going to do an edging. And sometimes it's just pink. It will go back in with that. But right now it's probably easier to see where the white is, and then we can go back in with the pink. I always think of flowers remind me of, I'm going to date myself here. You know, back in my day when girls were little and they wore dresses, they always wore a slip underneath the dress. And I liked slips because I always got the slips that had the ruffles. And I used to like the way that the folds would curve around and so forth, kind of like that. Here's one here. Now remember, if you want to make a line, you want to use a little more of your medium to let it drag out. Otherwise it will scumble, which is a good thing to know how to do, but it's not what we're doing here, even though we're doing light on top of dark. So it's all about relationships. This value right here is a lot lighter than this value here. And it's probably not that light, but I'm going to go back in with that with something else. And it swings around this way. Now there is a way, an advanced way of doing flowers where you just take a lot of paint, and I mean a lot of paint, a stiffer brush, and you just slap, 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 slap. That's really hard to do. And I could show you how to do that, but you would get frustrated because it takes a lot of practice. You can't learn that in one video. So it's probably best that you learn this way in order to understand the anatomy of a flower. And then as you keep doing flowers and practicing, that will come. That's how it was for me anyway. Always be on the form. This one is lighter than this one because it's in the sunlight. And this is being shadowed by that one. This one is really light. And this one is really light. And what you're doing is, what I said before, is you're creating this darkness here and this light that's all around. There will be a middle value of pink that we'll put in there to transition these lights from light to dark. There's actually a lot of blue in there. I might throw a blue in there too. This one is light. This one, it's along the edges, and I simplified this. It's a little more scallopy. Is that a word? I gotta go a little green. I'm gonna clip off some of that. Some of those veins on the form. Okay, now I'm going to try something here. This is a slightly warmer but lighter. Warmer than the alizarin. This is a, how did I make that? I believe that's a cadmium red medium and some white. If you pick up some of the other color, make sure you wipe your brush before you go back. Otherwise, you're going to get the other color in there. Like that. Oh, I forgot a white right there. That's really light. It's probably the lightest part of the whole thing. How did I miss that? You know, the best way to describe painting is, and I may have said this before, but it's always worth repeating, is you, after you get your drawing, you find the color, you know, you mix the color, mix the darkness of the color, find the shape of the color, and follow the form. I guess that's it in a nutshell. You know, because we're doing this in real time, I feel there's a lot of things that I have to miss out on. Maybe as I get a little more savvy with the whole video aspect of this, and Jack with the editing aspect of this, we can put together me going, you know, full head on to these things and showing you completely what can be done with a painting. But you just can't do that in real time because it's weeks, you know. We definitely need a reflected light in there. Do you see how that feels? The contrast feels too great. I mean, it is a huge, great contrast, but there feels like there should be a type of pink in there that comes from the bottom of that flower, that petal rather, to there. And if I see it there, then I'm immediately going to look over here to see if it's the same thing, and it is. So I'm going to, and those are like transitional colors, you know, transitional of where one value and color meets another. The other thing I want to do, I don't know if this will work. It might be too dark. I want to not just have pure white in there, but I have it feel light. Oh, we got to do this guy. Okay, so this is kind of pointy, scallopy. Weird kind of thing going on there. It needs to be a little bit lighter. There's like a vein going down in there. You know, it's this is what's interesting about this is, and I'll often tell my students at the studio to do this, as you're moving along, talk to it, you know, in your head, say this, you know, this is a valley, this is a hill, this is a dark, this is a light, and find your way that way. And it's interesting because I find that I do that in my head, and I find when I do these videos, I'm just saying it out loud as opposed to in my head. Okay, now down here is a lot of stuff going on there. So the question is, what color? I'm gonna try. I should probably just try white and alizarin. There are all these other kinds of reds called, you know, red madder and red lake. Those are beautiful colors, and sometimes you can get the color that you want with something like this. But the best thing I think to use is permanent alizarin, and make sure it says permanent, because reds can fade over time, especially if they're exposed to light. So nothing worse, and I have had this happen, nothing worse than taking, you know, weeks or months to do a painting, and then just the UV rays, natural, found in your house, all the reds disappear. I did a painting of Lexi, and it had a lot of that, these reds in the face, in different parts of the face, and then I put the greens in first, supported it with some reds, and now the reds are gone and her face is green. So it's quite frustrating, actually. So I'm going to thin out some. I did use the permanent alizarin with some white and thinned it out a lot with the medium. And what I'm going to do is just gesture the ruffles that you see in here, because they're quite beautiful, actually. That needs to be a lot lighter. I don't want to go too light. You've got to be careful of that, because remember, this is in the darks. You don't want to lighten that up too much, because what will happen is the flower will flip. But there is a reflected light in here that's quite beautiful. And reflective light gives you the details, you know, so it doesn't create holes. Like, for instance, if you didn't put a reflected light in a shadow, that shadow becomes a hole and it looks like the object's going to fall into it. So you have to be aware of that. That's actually quite light on that edge. And I don't want to go lighter than that, so I'm going to darken in there. Okay, I want to soften that transition line. Soften that. I'll often do that. I'll throw things in the way that they are, and then I go back and I say, oh, what needs to be softened? And I'm not talking about blending. I'm talking about softening, and there is a difference. Blending is you don't see the transition at all. Softening is you see the transition, but it's not a sharp line. Like this is a sharp line. So I just want to soften it. So it's still there. It's just not like in your face. Now, the other thing I want to do is, there's a beautiful blue in here. So I'm going to take some white with a little bit of cerulean. Very little. I don't want it to feel like a blue. I want it to feel like a white with blue. And wherever I see that, I'm going to put it in. Just adds to it, you know? This is a little bit of a scumble I'm doing on here. If you want to get some more professional paints, cerulean is a very expensive color, a real pure cerulean. You can get the hues. They're not as strong, and cerulean is a strong color, so you have to be a little careful with it. At the studio with the children, I refer to it as Hercules, because it will take over everything you've got. Now let's say you want that color and you don't want it so strong, but you want it a little, you know, certainly a pure color. A very good substitute for that is King's Blue from Old Holland. And it comes in a King's Blue Deep and a King's Blue Light, so you can choose whichever one you want for that. I find that the only difference between King's Blue Deep and King's Blue Light is one is just a little darker, so you don't really need to get both. You could get the dark and then you could always lighten it to your preference. And it's, you know, I'll be honest with you, in comparison to the price of cerulean blue, like say a Winsor Newton pure cerulean blue, I think the King's Blue by Old Holland is cheaper. Now, until I added that blue, it felt like a pink flower, you know. You add the blue, and yeah, it's a pink flower because it is a pink flower, but it feels like a pink flower that becomes white, you know what I mean, as it opens. The pink is only in the center. I didn't even touch this guy. Let's do something with this. It's actually quite a ruffle doodle under there. Ruffle doodle. I always say to the kids, put on the fur doodles when they're doing little animals. So we can say ruffle doodle fur flower. Okay, let's see. All right, I think it's done. So, wasn't a lot of blending, was a lot of direct paint. Wasn't the really advanced way to do flowers, but it's a really nice way to learn how to start that, you know. And you come out with a really nice picture. You could go back if you wanted and do a little more detail in the leaves and so forth by adding some lights and darks that you see. Try to think warm and cools, you know, the closer to the light, the warmer they are, closer to the dark, the cooler they are. I was going to add some stuff down here that was similar to this color because it is there, but I've decided not to because I think it'll take away from this. If I add some light greenish yellows down here, it's going to take away from that yellow right there. So I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to leave it like that. Oh, I was going to clip that off too. There we go. And it's done. See you next time.